On your panel this week, Ruth Deach, Baroness Deach, who is one of Britain's leading family lawyers. She chairs the Bar Standards Council and for 8 years chaired the Human Fertilisation and Embryology Authority, which is under threat from government cost-cutting. Alex von Tunzelmann is a historian and writer whose work you'll find in travel magazines and newspapers, as well as online at the Daily Beast. Her first book, Indian Summer, The Secret History of the End of an Empire, was described by The Observer as a history bursting at the seams with English eccentrics and Indian gentry. Maajid Nawaz is a man who would probably be described in a Hollywood film trailer as having been on a journey. He was a leading light in the global Islamist party Hizb ut-Tahrir. He was imprisoned in Egypt for 4 years and was adopted by Amnesty International as a prisoner of conscience. There, he changed his views, and when he was released 4 years ago, he joined mainstream Islam and helped set up the Quilliam Foundation to counter extremism. Douglas Murray is director at the Centre for Social Cohesion. He writes for The Spectator and the Daily Telegraph. He's been critical of the Quilliam Foundation and thinks the plan to build a mosque near Ground Zero in New York is stupid and offensive. Don't get him started on multiculturalism. It's a moral vacuum. And he's nominated the Labour leadership candidate Diane Abbott as possibly the stupidest woman in Britain. And that's our panel. And here's our first question.
Michael Vinton. Was it wise of Tony Blair to disclose that he will give £4.6 million profit from his memoirs to the Royal British Legion? Should he have kept it secret?
Douglas Murray, was it wise of Tony Blair to disclose he'll give £4.6 million profit to the Legion? Should he have done it secretly?
Well, the first thing is, I think, it's a very admirable thing to have done. And I've been troubled, I have to say, by the fact that, for him at any rate, I think this is a lose-lose situation. If he weren't to give the money, people would continue to criticise him. If he gives the money, people criticise him. I mean, when this was announced earlier this week, most of the newspapers said, blood money, or, is this a sign of a guilty conscience? And so on. In other words, he can do no right on this. I think that giving such a substantial amount of money to the British Legion is, of course, a terrific thing to do. I wish they got more money given to them. But yes, the question of, as it were, whether or not charity should be a private matter is of course, what you're asking. And this is a very difficult one. I mean, for public figures, if they keep such things to themselves, they, as I say, can be criticised with impunity. On the other hand, when they do it, they're accused of being cynical. I mean, I'm not quite sure what the solution is on this, other than that you should applaud anyone giving money to such good causes. And I wish that we could be slightly less cynical, actually, as a society, when people do things that will have such a good outcome.
Maajid Nawaz, should he have done it secretly?
Well, I'm a believer in secret charity. I really detest people who feel they have the need to declare how much they've given.
You detest them?
Well, I detest the behaviour. I mean, it's a strong word.
Why is it detestable?
But I think that there's a certain element of, first of all, there's a peer pressure involved. If you're in a sort of a charity dinner and you're declaring how much you give, I think what should be more of interest to people is the proportion of your wealth, rather than someone who happens to have a lot of wealth giving a whole lot of money. It may not be necessarily proportionate to how much they earn. So that's the first point. But I think it would be, I've always been opposed to the invasion of Iraq, but I think Tony Blair has been one of the best politicians we've had in this country. But I think it would have been wiser for him, perhaps, to give that money to the Iraqi people to help them reconstruct the country that was so devastated by the war there.
Ruth Deach.
Well, the question is whether it should be secret or not, and he can't win, can he? Because if he'd kept it secret, people would say, what's he doing with this huge advance for his memoirs? So he's made it public, and I think he ought to set a good example. There are lots of others who've made money in some fashion or another out of the war. I hope that the contractors and the oil magnates will follow suit. But let's also be glad that it's not Gordon Brown's memoirs, because I'm not sure how very well they are going to sell. I think what's fascinating is that Tony Blair doesn't need $4 million. I think that's extremely interesting, and seeing where his money is coming from, even though we, the taxpayer, are still footing the bill for his security. But generally, I'm glad he's that well off. He could probably sort our deficits single-handedly. I'm getting a bit tired of memoirs. There are just too many of them, aren't there? We're going to be glutted soon with memoirs. If it's not Mandelson, then it's Campbell or it's Cherie Blair and so on. And there was a time 30 years ago when a politician's memoirs were almost forbidden and quite shocking. And now they become commonplace, and they may not sell as well as they should. But on balance, I'm glad he's disclosed it, and I'm glad he's doing it, because those who will get it, who will get the benefit, don't really care and shouldn't care where it comes from. I'm just so pleased that they're getting it.
Alex, what do you think?
Well, I would agree. I think the Royal British Legion is a really excellent cause. I'm very glad they're getting the money. I think it's an interesting question whether he should have done it anonymously. That's kind of the first thing that struck me about it, actually. I thought it was interesting that he chose to publicise it. And I think the bigger issue for a lot of people is that sorry seems to be the hardest word. If he's genuinely apologetic about what happened with Iraq, I think we'd rather hear that, perhaps than have this gesture with no real explanation.
Why do you think the timing was interesting?
The timing, well, I mean, I'm not sure exactly why the timing would be now. I mean, I don't know when the memoirs are coming out.
I mean, do you think he made the announcement? Some people have suggested that he did this in order to sell the book.
Yes, possibly. Well, I mean, actually, that's another good point. I mean, 4.6 million advance, you'd need to sell, as a writer, I'm afraid I sort of slightly know this, you need to sell at least 1 million copies. Now, that's an awful lot. I mean, that's the sort of Harry Potter level, and I'm not really sure it would have sold that many. It might well sell a lot more now. I mean, Obama, just to give you a comparison, Barack Obama sold 700,000 of Dreams from My Father in the UK, and that's, I think, the biggest selling political memoir here.
But if Ruth's right, he doesn't have to worry about the money. Don't worry for him.
No, I won't lose any sleep.
I think the thing is, actually, the question of timing is an important one, because there is an appropriate level of concern, I think, in the country. It has been building for a while, at seeing a former Prime Minister travelling around the world making huge sums of money, quite fantastical sums of money, for really doing very little, and sometimes in quite grotesque circumstances. I mean, really hawking himself around to make cash. I personally find it a very demeaning thing to watch, just as a British person, seeing a former Premier behaving in this way. I'd rather that he didn't do that. But he's probably, being a very brilliant politician, become aware of the fact that people have started to sense there's something a bit iffy about doing this, and thus has come forward with this wonderful magnanimous gesture.
What should former Prime Ministers do to earn a crust?
Oh, I think you should retire and shut up.